Hello everyone and welcome back to the Warwick F1 show. We've had a weekend off from Formula One action to digest what these new 2026 regulations have given us in the opening two races. And now we're looking ahead to round 3 of the Formula One season at the iconic storied Suzuka circuit in Japan. So in this preview episode, we're going to discuss the circuit, our expectations for the pecking order, maybe some of the special liveries that we've seen revealed ahead of this weekend, and some of recent news that's been going on in Formula One. I am your host for this episode, Daniel, and I'm joined by our podcast long-timer and former host, Callum. So thank you for joining me on this episode, Callum. Firstly, I'd like to get your perspective on the possibilities that these 2026 regulations could give us in terms of racing on this very old and quite unchanged circuit.
Yeah, so in the past, obviously, it hasn't been brilliant racing. I think, just as you mentioned, it's quite an old circuit. It's quite narrow in places. And even though, say what you want about these new regulations, whether the racing's artificial or not, but it has given us a lot more overtaking with this new element of strategy coming into it with the power and the overtake mode and things like that. So I do think this is one of my hopes for these new regulations, is that it can bring more excitement to tracks like Japan, like Monaco, for example, where they just have seemed very dull and just not much happening in them throughout the race. I mean, take last year as a perfect example in Japan. As much as I think qualifying was very unexpected to find Verstappen up there and getting pole, but after that for the race, not really much happened, quite an uneventful race. And unfortunately, we have had that quite a lot in the past from Japan. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what these new regulations can bring to a track like Japan, as it is the first time that we've had a circuit this season where we don't anticipate it to be very good. China's quite an open circuit, so that usually brings some fairly good racing, and Australia has been the season opener, so that kind of is, I guess, a little bit different. But Japan, very narrow, very unlike China, not typically a load of overtakes. So it'll be very interesting to see, hopefully, what the new regulations can bring in terms of excitement to this racetrack.
Yeah, I mean, I would completely agree with you. I think Suzuka's one of those circuits that isn't necessarily a fan favorite to watch on the Sunday, because, like you said, the action isn't that great. The track is very narrow. We haven't had a lot of wheel-to-wheel racing in the past, but it is a driver's favorite in terms of just pushing the car on a Saturday in qualifying. That might change this year, given how qualifying has unfolded over the first 2 rounds, and it's not quite the spectacle that it was, and maybe they're not going to be pushing at 10/10 through the first sector anymore, which is undoubtedly where Verstappen earns his money in that Red Bull at Suzuka, is in the first sector. He's just been mega at it all his career, basically. But it's one of those tracks where it's obviously iconic, but it hasn't delivered so much recently. Last year, like you mentioned, it was a bit of a snooze fest. I think it was resurfaced just prior to the race, so there was very low degradation as a result, and they brought the hardest tyre compounds, which they've done again this year for some reason. But that meant that there was even less degradation than there would normally be. And obviously in 2025, the only way you could really race with someone was if you had a tyre offset thanks to degradation. But I want to ask you, with the battery deployment that we've seen over the first 2 races, do you think that is a more primary influence on the racing that we get than tyre degradation? Do you think tyre degradation has kind of fallen back in how important it is in getting an overtake done relative to how clever you are with the battery and where you use it around the lap?
I think certainly for a circuit like Japan, I think it's going to be, because as you mentioned, with the resurfacing and the hard tire compounds that they're bringing to the circuit, it does kind of remove strategy or tire strategy as a dynamic in the race, and that is probably what meant that last year's race was such a snooze fest, because we didn't have any overtaking on track, which pretty much just leaves tyre strategy, and obviously there wasn't any of that either. So that, I think, is going to be a very important aspect here in terms of how drivers are strategizing. In terms of overall, it's a very difficult question. I think I think the battery deployment is more noticeable, not only because it is a new aspect, so we're less used to seeing it as us fans, but also it's something that actually affects the drivers inside an individual lap. When you're talking about a tyre strategy, you're talking about something that happens over the entire duration of the race. And so perhaps it's not something that, if a driver had to use up a bit more of their, or have a bit more of an increase in tyre wear on a single lap, it wouldn't really matter too much, because it means that they could just adjust for it over the next couple of laps, because they're playing the long-term game when it comes to tyre strategy. But the battery deployment is a lot different. They have to be monitoring it every single lap, because if you overuse your power way too much, just for a sector, you're going to get punished for it by another driver potentially gaining some time on you or even overtaking you. So I think definitely, even though both aspects are important, I think the energy deployment is a lot more essential lap after lap, and it has a lot more of a tendency to catch drivers out, which is why we're getting such good and interesting racing, because drivers aren't used to having to do that potentially.
Yeah, it's certainly a different strategic game to what we've normally seen in Formula One in the past. You're right; the strategy hasn't been that interesting in Japan in the past. Anyway, it's been a one-stop mostly. But I want to get into who we expect to be, kind of where we expect each team to be in the pecking order. At the front, you'd have to say it's probably going to be Mercedes again, right? But given Ferrari's incredible starts, maybe we can still have a battle for the lead if they've retained that advantage.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts on this are, but obviously it has been kind of thought of as a Mercedes and Ferrari battle so far. But do you think that's actually really the case? Because it's only really been Ferrari off the start. If you look at anything else, the fact that it's been a 1-2 finish for the first two races, and Mercedes have looked significantly better in qualifying, especially in Australia. Is it maybe just an illusion that Ferrari are up there? I don't know, because I think this comes into my point, I think, for what team's going to be in front. I think this is a really important race for Ferrari in terms of the fact that they have wanted to be competitive, but then Mercedes have got a 1-2 finish for the first two races of this season and look very dominant. And they can very easily run away with this, I think, with both of these championships, especially with how good Antonelli is looking. So they almost need to kind of, at some point, make a statement to say, we're in this as well. And before going into this month-long break, I think they'd very much like to be able to do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty torn on this, to be honest. I think there are certain tracks that Ferrari will be much more competitive at. Like, I'm expecting Miami to probably play more into Ferrari's favour than Japan has. They were pretty competitive around Australia. I'm convinced Charles Leclerc could have got second if they hadn't thrown away the strategy by not boxing under the virtual safety car. I think that was a big mistake, and probably, maybe even cost Lewis Hamilton a shot at getting his first podium. Obviously, they rectified that in China, but I do think that Ferrari will be able to take the fight to Mercedes over certain tracks. Then you come to the development race in Formula One, right? And we've seen before that Ferrari have been outdeveloped over a season quite consistently.
Yeah, that's the other thing, yeah.
I mean, 2022 was especially harrowing for Ferrari fans, because they were when they had the fastest car, they were throwing the races away. And then when they didn't have the fastest car, they were still throwing the races away. But they were much slower when they were doing it, because Red Bull had outdeveloped them. So I don't know if we'll have a season-long battle in that way. I'm not too optimistic, but I think that hopefully we can get to see, especially over the first half of the season, a couple of Ferrari wins at least when we come to circuits they're more suited to. So I think we've seen now 2 from 2. We've had Ferraris battling each other, battling the Mercedes. But I want to ask about Kimi Antonelli, right? Because he really stepped up in China, and he proved that he's kind of turned up for this season. He's made a huge step from last year, and he really wants to take the fight to George Russell. He doesn't want to just gift his teammate a championship, right? What are your thoughts on whether he can be competitive first at this circuit, but also for the remainder of this season? Do you have much confidence in his abilities to do that in only his second season in Formula One, despite being the generational talent that he is?
I'm going to say no, even though it was a very good performance from him in China. The trouble is, I think, even though I do fully anticipate Antonelli to get a few more wins this season, at least, if that Mercedes car stays as dominant as it is, over the Ferraris and the other teams that may be developing towards them. And so I think he will be competitive, but will he challenge Russell for the championship? I just can't really see it. And the thing I come back to when I say that is the mistake he made into the final hairpin in the Chinese circuit. Okay, yes, he was about 9 seconds ahead, which means that luckily it didn't detriment to his position in the end. He was still able to get first. But I think he's still showing that, compared to Russell at least, his lack of experience. And that's not to say he's a bad driver. Like, he is as you mentioned, generational talent, and he will, I think, be a world champion one day. But you got to remember that this is his second season in F1. Russell has had experience with Mercedes, he's had experience with other teams, with Williams. And so I think just when both drivers when the Mercedes car turns up, it is just more likely going to be Russell when both drivers are doing well. And so I just don't anticipate Antonelli to really be able to properly challenge to such an extent that we get some kind of title battle for the Drivers' Championship. I do think it's going to be Russell, even if Antonelli can maybe challenge occasionally for the odd race win.
Yeah. I mean, I think the sheer amount of progress that Antonelli would have to make from last year, especially into the European leg of this season, right, when he really struggled last year. It was partly due to the car's characteristics and the changes that they made. I think it was on suspension, didn't really suit him. But it was still a huge gulf to Russell that he would have to close this season, which I think is maybe a bit too optimistic. Having said that, he was pretty close to Russell at this race last year. He finished less than or just over a second behind him, I believe. So he's clearly no slouch at this circuit. It is the kind of circuit that he would thrive at. It's one where you need to use the whole circuit, open up the corners, which is something Antonelli is really impressive at. Okay, so we've kind of cleared that up. It's going to be Mercedes at the front, possible challenge by Ferrari.
Actually, sorry, just before you go on to, because I presume you're going to go on to the other teams, the midfield teams, but I would say is, with the Ferraris at least, so obviously the way that this has normally happened over Australia and China is that they have obviously an amazing race start and then they get overtaken a bit later by the Mercedes. But is the nature of Japan's circuit, do you think, in the fact that it's harder to overtake on track, maybe going to play into Ferrari's hands a little bit by the fact that they can waltz ahead at the start, but then maybe the Mercedes struggle to re-overtake them on track later on in the race? Or do you think the Mercedes car is just too dominant for that? I don't know.
I think it's a really good point, actually. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. And the thing with Suzuka as well is there aren't a huge number of straights on which to deploy your energy. So if they're going to be harvesting at pretty much similar points of the track, they're going to be deploying at similar points, which will serve to negate the advantage that Mercedes have to a certain extent, and will possibly allow Ferrari to stay ahead at least for longer before that Ferrari deg that we've kind of seen kicks in, because they warm up their tyres easier, which is why they can kind of stay ahead at the start for a little bit. But then it does kind of turn into degradation. Maybe due to the resurfacing, there will be less degradation, and they will be able to hold on and fight for the win proper, which would be great to see. But yeah, it is those kinds of track characteristics that kind of determine whether we're going to have that battle for the win towards the end of the race that we've kind of lacked so far this season. I think is a really good point. Okay, let's turn our attentions towards the back end of the top four teams, if you will. Red Bull and McLaren. I think there's still kind of unknown variables in this season, largely because neither McLaren raced last weekend out in China, so we don't know their pace. where they are in the pecking order at that circuit. We have Australia as a reference point for Lando Norris only, because Oscar Piastri still didn't even start then.
No.
So what are the musings on McLaren? I mean, they've had the most podiums in Suzuka history. They're the team with the most podiums, but it feels like it would be progress for them to even start the race at this point, which is crazy to say, given that they're the reigning constructors champions. It can't get much worse.
I think in terms of the difference between Red Bull and McLaren, the question is, are they going to start, as you mentioned, because there's only been 1 out of 4 possible finishes that they've actually had out of the first 2 races. So I think that's more the case with the question for McLaren. Genuinely, for the question with Red Bull, I have no idea what their pace is, because it's so baffling, because in Australia, Hadjar was doing so well. I think he was probably running in third or something before his car blew up. And Verstappen obviously had that issue in qualifying, but he was able to make a really good recovery drive to 6th. But then in China, they were just nowhere. Even though Hadjar finished the race, he was only able to get up to P8. And then obviously Verstappen retired as well. So I think I'm just so confused as to where both of those teams are. And so I think maybe, if anything, I'm wanting to say McLaren in terms of being the 3rd fastest team, which admittedly completely contradicts what I said for the China preview, interestingly, which tells you how reliable my prediction is. And the only reason I say that is because is just from the one full race length performance that we've seen McLaren have, which is Lando Norris, and the fact that he was able to get 5th, which I suppose we're kind of seeing as the best of the rest behind Ferrari and Mercedes. But again, was that just a 1 race fluke? We don't know, to be honest. That's the only racing from McLaren we have seen this season. So it's I think maybe perhaps just McLaren. But that's, again, if all 4 cars actually finish, which I realise at this point is quite unlikely.
Yeah, it is actively unlikely that all of them will finish. I can't believe I'm saying this for Max Verstappen, the 4-time world champion. He just needs a clean weekend. He just needs to get through qualifying and the race without issues. Obviously, in Australia, he had that crash in Q1 and he was knocked out. In China, his engine just blew up. So I feel like if he gets a clean run at it, he can probably haul that car maybe into the top 5 to displace, the McLarens possibly, if the circuit is suited to that car. But if Max is going to do it anywhere, he's going to do it at Suzuka, right? I mean, Red Bull have 8 wins at Suzuka, I think, which is the most of any team in history, and Max hasn't lost. The last race that he didn't win at Suzuka was 2019, which shows how much of a vice grip he's had at this circuit over his competitors. And last year, obviously being the standout when the McLaren was the much superior car. But his qualifying and also his team's decision to run a pretty low drag setup in qualifying really helped in the race as well, because he was able to stay ahead of the McLarens thanks to that, despite their pace advantage. So I think Red Bull and Max could get a few good points on the board. I doubt they'll get close to the podium, but I am actually of the opinion that Max might be able to beat the McLarens this weekend.
This is very true, and I think especially if Verstappen finishes the race and he's not in the top 5 for this, I think he's not in the top 5 for this race, then I think that's really saying something about the Red Bull's pace, because as you mentioned, Verstappen loves this circuit. I remember last year we were fully expecting it to be McLaren dominated, and Verstappen just produced, I think, one of the best qualifying I've ever seen, just came out of nowhere and then completely dominated the race afterwards. And so, and of course, as you mentioned, last time he didn't win here was 2019. It's a really great circuit for him. And so I think if he has the opportunity to finish in the top 5, as in his car's actually running and it's not, then that's some serious worries for McLaren. For Red Bull, because it's not like Verstappen hangs around. He is a driver who will get absolutely everything he can out of the car, even with these new regulations. So it's going to be very interesting to see where Verstappen and Red Bull sit after this race.
Yeah, even if he detests the regulations and
he can still drive
a shopping trolley to its absolute maximum. So he is just a competitive animal.
Absolutely.
Last year, he did gain 3.5 tenths on Piastri through just the first sector alone in qualifying, which kind of quantifies his advantage that he has in that part of the lap. Okay, we're kind of moving our way backwards through the expected pecking order. So now we've arrived at the midfield, which is a really interesting picture this year, because I didn't expect Haas to be as high up as they currently are. They're only 1 point off McLaren in the team's championships, which is pretty crazy to say. But they're kind of under threat from Alpine a little bit, I think, especially in the last race. Alpine seem to have really stepped up their game, and they actually reckon that they could have taken the P5 from Oliver Behrman, with Pierre Gasly, of course, had the cards fallen their way slightly more this weekend. So where do you place those two teams, Alpine and Haas, or possibly do you see a different surprise contender emerging to the top this weekend?
I'm not sure if there's going to be anyone different. I think if there was anyone different, it might be either the Racing Bulls or maybe Audi. I still am waiting on perhaps a good performance from Hulkenberg as well. I still do have faith in him as such, I suppose, as he just narrowly missed out on the points in P11 in China. But I think it is mainly going to be between the Haas's and the Alpines. I think if I had to choose one, I would probably say the Haas's, just purely because I don't have too much faith in Colapinto. Obviously, he did get a point last weekend or last race in China, but I was really not a big fan, or he did seem to really struggle in that Alpine car near the end of last season. And I think Gasly is just an amazing driver. He'll always get some really good points, but I think just with Ocon, with that little bit more experience over Colapinto and Behrman looking as sharp as he is, I think they've definitely got more of a likelihood of getting points this weekend.
I'd agree, although less so with Ocon, because he does seem to be really struggling, and he hasn't got any points this year. Behrman has all 17 of Haas's points for the season so far. Yeah. Ocon is in struggle town at the moment. I think Komatsu, the team principal, actually said before the season that he wants to see Ocon step up a bit this year, because towards the tail end of 2025, he was kind of falling behind Behrman a little bit in terms of competitiveness. So I think it's really interesting that it's still kind of the case that Behrman's stepped up and Ocon's kind of lacking, especially with that clumsy incident with Colapinto in the Chinese Grand Prix as well. He just doesn't seem to be the Ocon who can kind of maximize midfield cars that we've seen in the past. It's kind of a shame. But for completeness' sake, I want to ask you, Callum, will Aston Martin finish the race, or will an Aston Martin car finish the race? We need to talk about these cars who are languishing at the back of the grid.
I don't think so. As much as I'm not sure if we're allowed to, are we actually allowed to put an Aston Martin as our DNF in our predictions? Because it seems pretty much certain at this point that an Aston Martin will not finish the race.
Yeah, I think the answer for now is no. It's been temporarily banned, but we might reinstate it later in the season if they're actually able to finish the race. That's
just a statement as to how bad their car has been if we're actually banning people from mentioning them as a DNF. I don't think at the moment. I think maybe I've got a bit of I'll kind of reevaluate my prediction of them after this month-long break, as I imagine Aston Martin are very thankful to have this big gap that we have after the Japanese Grand Prix to just recollect and see what improvements can be made, just so they can just finish a race by the next race in, which I think is Miami. And so I don't have any confidence in them, honestly. I still think they're behind Cadillac at the moment, in the sense that, or I don't expect Cadillac to finish in the points, but at least they can actually finish the race in some cases. So I don't think Aston Martin are going to finish the race, I'll be honest. I'm sorry to say it, and I love Alonso, and so I'm so disappointed for him that he's ended up in this situation, but I think just not even he can rescue that car at the moment.
Okay. I mean, if it breaks on him, then there's literally nothing he can do. It's just a sad waste of his talents, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I think just that has been the Aston Martin. Unfortunately for him, over the past few years, really, is he definitely I think deserves to be in a better car than what he is at the moment.
Yeah, since the middle of 2023, they really fell off. That string of podiums that they had at the start of the season feels like a fever dream, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's sort of surreal that it was only 3 years ago. But maybe there is light at the end of the tunnel. Obviously, Jonathan Wheatley has departed Audi and is rumoured to be going to Aston Martin. So possibly they're getting some strong leadership figure in Wheatley. I mean, look at what he's done with Sauber last year, especially. Their 2025 compared to 24 was outstanding, really. So he's clearly made a difference there. But can he turn Aston Martin around if he's the one to head there and take over Adrian Newey's role? We'll have to wait and see. Just a word before predictions on a couple of the special liveries that we're seeing for Suzuka this weekend. Teams like to get creative when we head to Japan, and that's not different this weekend. We've got 3 special liveries. A couple of them quite unusual, I'd say. We've got a Godzilla livery from Haas, which what was it representing, Callum? I can't remember.
Apparently, it was representing Godzilla as a figure of Japan for the post-World War II trauma and nuclear anxieties, and that is given to us by the credit of Microsoft Copilot. So, I've got no idea why that's what they're wanting to represent. But yeah, I don't know. I don't mind the livery personally. It's okay.
Yeah, I mean they've got a silhouette of Godzilla on the engine cover. It looks quite cool. I just really didn't expect it, to be honest. But yeah, it looks good. Mercedes, on the other hand, have decided to paint a wolf's face on their front wing. I don't think it's a Toto reference. I think they've come in with a tagline of "Unleashing the Beast" this weekend. I don't know what that means. Hopefully not that they're turning their power unit up to...
Why are they not unleashing the beast every weekend? Surely they have been releasing the beast already, given how good their performances have been.
Well, not if you believe some of the rumours, Callum. They've been turning it down so that so Ferrari don't get the additional development opportunities entitled if they're too far off Mercedes' engine. But
even after the first 2 races, people believe that Mercedes is sandbagging. I thought this was only something that was restricted to pre-season testing, but apparently not. People still believe that.
Never. Did you watch 2014? Come on.
I unfortunately was not around then. No. Not watching F1, but
no.
Yes.
A final special livery that we're seeing this weekend is from Racing Bulls. It's kind of cherry blossoms, a bit of calligraphy inspired, but they're always coming out with consistently banging special liveries. I think we've seen quite a few from Racing Bulls in the past, and even their main season liveries are really something quite special. I was quite breathtaking. Is that an adjective? I don't know. It was. I find these liveries quite breathtaking. I think they're really striking. The white and the red. They don't clash. They're quite harmonic, I think. My first thought was that the red looks a little bit like blood, the way it's splattered onto the liveries, but I do think it's kind of...
They've actually, the cars actually run someone over... Choice. They've run someone over the grid. Yeah.
It reminds me of... like in Montreal after they've run over the ground.
It reminds me of... I'm pretty sure Red Bull did some kind of... Not like this kind of blood red, but more of a lighter red when they had the white, yellow, and red. I think it was it Istanbul or was it Turkey or something like that?
Oh, the special white livery that they did. They did that last year as well. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Right. Fair enough. It kind of reminds me of that, I suppose. But no, I do really like the Racing Bulls livery, as it's kind of, I guess it's kind of, has before been a source of special liveries for Red Bull, as Red Bull, the actual Red Bull team is usually quite restrictive with what they do with their car. But I think it's I really do like this livery. It's apart from something I did notice, which is from the photo I'm looking at the moment, which I think I just brought your attention to, the fact that they have the Red Bull can logo on the inside of their back wing, which I think looks absolutely awful and does not go with the design of the car at all. But apart from that, it looks absolutely amazing, and I can't wait to see it on track.
Maybe they're going for the HP technique of making it look absolutely dreadful, so everyone talks about it, to get more exposure as a result.
Maybe.
It's a good tactic, I must say.
To be fair, I didn't even need that at the moment. Like their results have been good enough on track. They don't need to bring attention to themselves in any other way, especially with I think how strong Lindblad's been. But no, good livery. I think it's the best one out of the lot. The Haas one is like, yeah, could take or leave it. I don't know why I liked the Haas livery from last year they had the cherry blossoms for Japan on their livery. I thought that was
I think so. Yeah,
I think that was a great livery. And then the Mercedes just like, okay, there's a wolf on the front of your car, doesn't make that much difference. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the special liveries.
Yeah, hopefully Mercedes don't have a howler this weekend. Sorry, I apologize. I think it's time we moved into predictions now. We are predicting pole position and then positions 1 through to 5, and then we're going to head to our DNFs and random predictions. I'm going to run through Lucy's predictions first. She said some in, so we'll go through these and then we'll come to yours, Callum. So Lucy's chosen George Russell for pole position. Predictable, but might net some points there. And shock horror. A Charles Leclerc win, though, which will turn the tables on Sunday if we see that. I'd very much like that. 3 winners from 3. That would be this season, which is very exciting. But realism sets in, and we've got George Russell in second place. But Lewis Hamilton, for the second race in a row, finishes on the podium in third. With Kimi Antonelli rounding out the top 4, just a couple places behind his teammate, and Isaac Hadjar in P5, which I think is an interesting choice not to go for Verstappen. Who knows, maybe he'll get disqualified for his second racing weekend in a row, if you caught that story. But it can't be for using too many tyres this time. I thought that was a really weird reason to get disqualified. I don't know the rules and regulations of these MLS races, but they used too many sets of tyres. And got disqualified from his Nürburgring race that he was competing in on Saturday, I think it was. So that
his team like absolutely dominated, as far as I'm
aware.
They finished very well.
They took the race, all 3 of those drivers, and then 2 hours later they were disqualified. So I can't remember the last time Verstappen was disqualified from a Formula One race. So
has he ever been? I don't know.
That's the thing. I don't know.
When he just caused chaos. If anything.
Yeah, but before a few years ago, disqualifications really weren't that common in Formula One. It was mostly with the ride height issues and weight that we've seen in recent years. That disqualification's been more common. So I'm not sure he has, but that would have been a new experience for him then. Callum, could you run us through your pole position and top 5 for the weekend, please?
And top 5 as well. Yes, of course. Well, I've gone for... It is boring, but I want the point, so I'm going to go with the pole position for George Russell, that he's going to convert that into a win. I am sorry that I'm not going with... I was thinking about going with Ferraris, but then I was like, do I really think they're actually going to get the win, or do I just want to be interesting and choose something different to what we've had? But I think George Russell, he's the most likely to get the win. He's been very good all season. All season in the first 2 races, and the Mercedes car looks as good as ever. But then I have put Lewis Hamilton in second place, as I thought he was very strong last time around. I think he's looking very confident in that Ferrari, much more confident than he was last season, and I expect him to get some good results for at least for this first part of the season, while the Ferrari is still looking in fairly good shape. I put Antonelli in third. He's obviously coming off the back of a very good weekend, his first race win in China. Leclerc in P4, obviously expecting the Mercedes and the Ferrari to be in the top 4 places. I don't think there's any other team that's really even going to damage that at this stage, unless one of those 4 cars DNFs or something happens to them. And then I, as you quite rightly alluded to, Daniel, in regards to Lucy's predictions, I have gone for Verstappen P5. I just think if anyone out of the rest of the drivers is going to get into that top 5, it is going to be Verstappen. And if the Red Bull car finishes, he should be doing well around this circuit, unless the Red Bull car has an absolute howler, because we know how much he likes that circuit.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think they're quite sensible. I've also, well, you didn't fall for it, but I've previously fallen for the trap of trying to be interesting in predictions and sacrificing a lot of points as a result of it, noticeably in Australia, and I got slandered for my predictions. But that's fine. That's behind us. I'll run you through my polling top 5. God, we're so boring. Pole position, Russell converted to a win again. Let's gloss past that. Then the Leclerc P2, breaking the streak of Mercedes 1-2s that we've seen. But Kimi Antonelli's coming in 3rd. Then I've put Max Verstappen in P4, ahead of the Ferrari of Lewis Hamilton. I don't know, I might be overestimating how much Verstappen can have an impact on the car around that circuit, but I just think he's magic and he's going to pull it out the bag.
If there is anyone
to overtake, like you mentioned.
If there is anyone that can do it, it would be Max Verstappen, realistically. I think it's more, whenever I talk about where will Verstappen be, it's a question of how good is the Red Bull car, not how good is Verstappen around this circuit. He's good around any circuit. So, yeah, it's if the Red Bull car can be there, I think he can definitely get into that top 5.
Absolutely, without a doubt. Okay, DNF and random predictions now. Lucy's DNF, she's gone for Esteban Ocon, which is a bit of a random one. He's been having a rough time, so maybe that will intensify. And the random prediction is that Oliver Behrman gets a race ban following this race.
What? So, okay.
Yeah. Ollie Behrman is currently on 10 penalty points, so he only needs 2. And these penalty points don't actually expire until May, so he's got a while to be careful. But I think it's possible that at some point he could have a clumsy accident that results in a couple of penalty points and thus a race ban. And of course, he would be the second Haas driver in, 3 years to get a race ban, because obviously that time for Baku as well, when he was replaced, ironically, by Oliver Behrman, who's now facing a race ban. Yeah, too many rookie mistakes for Behrman last year. There's a footnote from Lucy which says, please don't judge the random prediction, but rough week for Haas if true. Too late, we have judged it, but it would be a pretty tough week for Haas.
No, especially with how good Behrman's been. I wouldn't like to see that personally, because obviously neither would Haas, as he is clearly their better driver at the moment with how poor Ocon's looking. So very interesting prediction. Shall I do my DNF and wall prediction?
Please do.
So DNF, I've gone for I realised my top 5 and my top 5 compared to my DNF and wall prediction are a bit contradictory, so maybe trying to cover all bases here. But for my DNF, I've actually gone with Isaac Hadjar. So I think I think the Red Bull car has looked very unreliable. Well, evidently, Hadjar retiring in Australia, Verstappen obviously having that issue in Q1 that many started at the back, and then him also retiring in China. So it wouldn't surprise me if one of those Ford engines blows up again. And so I'm going to go with Isaac Hadjar for the DNF. And then for my wild prediction, mine does involve Behrman, but it's a lot more of a positive prediction, which is maybe another Behrman top 5. He was able to do it last weekend. He was able to get 5th. I was really pleased for him for getting that result, best result of his career, I'm pretty sure. And hopefully he can repeat that this time around. So Behrman top 5 is my wild prediction.
Yep, that's suitably random because, of course, if the McLarens start this weekend, I think that's going to be pretty tough to replicate for Behrman. But,
absolutely.
Definitely a cause for celebration if he can do that. My DNF is Alex Albon. I was on the pod this time last year and I also predicted Alex Albon to DNF. Nobody DNF'd that race, unfortunately, so none of us got any points. But he did DNF in the Japanese Grand Prix in 2024, 23 and 22, so all of his previous starts with Williams. He's been pretty unlucky, but also got involved in some scraps. So I'm just saying, took a year off last year, but now it's going to be back. And I don't think he'll be in contention for points really anyway with the Williams car that he's got. So, it might not be much of a disaster for him. And my random prediction, I didn't contribute to this earlier. I wanted to get your take, Callum, but I actually think that an Aston Martin is going to finish a race this on Sunday. I do. I think
that's your prediction.
Yeah, that's my random prediction. It's not just Honda's home race. They literally own the circuit, and they're going to be scenes of wild celebration when they finally cross the line, not 15 laps down like Stroll in Australia. They're actually going to be within 10 laps of the lead driver, and they're going to cross the line, not going to get resurrected halfway through the race, like I said, and take the checkered flag to actually finish the race.
Okay, interesting. So your idea of them finishing a race is that they can't take the break like they did in Australia. They have to do all of the laps.
Yeah, because that's just cheating, isn't it? I mean, you could just retire on lap 1,
Fair.
come back on the last lap, and then cross the line.
Fair enough.
Which I don't think really would count. This would be a classified finisher, is what I'd say.
Just an Aston Martin, I think, is maybe not too much of a stretch. If you said both Aston Martins, I genuinely think that's maybe too wild at this point. Yeah. But again, I just think, I don't know whether they've got this vibration issue sorted out where it's clearly very painful for the drivers, especially a driver, the older driver of Alonso and Stroll, who's obviously had a broken wrist before with that accident that happened a year or two ago. I can't remember exactly when, but that will be a step in the right direction for Aston Martin. Long way to go, but a start for them to finish a race and make all the laps.
Yeah, the thing with steps in the right direction is that Aston Martin seem to take quite a few of them in the opposite direction after that. So we'll see if they're able to keep up any momentum at all. Maybe they'll just go back to double DNFing in Miami, but we'll have to wait and see. That pretty much wraps up our preview of the Japanese Grand Prix this weekend. Enjoy the race, savor it, because we are not going to have any more Formula One action until April after this weekend for F1's month-long spring break, which is a new thing, but of course very justified for the right reasons. So we'll be back next week to review the Japanese Grand Prix, discuss what we've seen, and hopefully we'll have a lot to talk about. So we'll see, won't we? I want to thank Callum for joining me for this episode, reliable as always, and we will see you in the next episode. Goodbye.